Yes.
It was supposed to be delivered.
Okay, it's 2 o'clock, so I'll start off our meeting with our opening karakia. Mā te whakarongo, mā te kōrero, mā te nākau, mā te wairua, mā te manaki mai, mā te manaki atu, ka puawai, te maramatanga, TA, Māori order. Through listening, through talking, from the heart, from the spirit, through giving and receiving respect, understanding will believe. Welcome along to our council meeting today at the airport. I think it's probably one of our coziest council meetings of the year. And when I do the health and safety briefing, I might have to be the captain and hand over to the crew to point out where the exits are, and in the unlikely event of an emergency, life jackets are under your seat. On a serious note, the toilets are straight over there on your right. Evacuation will be the doors that came in, and anything else that's marked with a green fire exit sign. If we can please make sure our phones are turned on silent for this meeting, and these proceedings are being recorded for the purpose of live video for both live streaming and downloading. So by remaining in this meeting, you're consenting to being filmed for viewing by the public. I've got apologies from councillors Boparai and Rudenclaw and councillor O'Brien. And I don't think there's any further apologies because everyone else is here. I've got councillor Keast online, hopefully, or coming in. Do I have a mover for those apologies? Councillor Granny, seconded by councillor Menzies. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? That is carried. Do we have any further leave of absence coming up for anyone? Councillor Granny?
I request a leave of absence for the 5th to the 10th of December, please.
5th to 10th of December. And I'll be the 20th to the 29th. Any further leave of absence? I apologise in advance if I cough. I've got a niggly cough that keeps coming up, but I'll try and get through the meeting without it. Can I have a mover for that leave of absence? Councillor Fraser, seconded by councillor Menzies. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? That is carried. Do we have any councillors with a conflict of interest for any items on the agenda today? There being I don't believe we've got any extraordinary urgent items, which takes us to the confirmation of the minutes from our last meeting held on the 6th of November, and that's on page 6 of your agenda. Do we have a mover that those are true and correct? Councillor Spraggan, seconded by councillor Fraser. Any discussion on those? There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. And sorry, I was remiss of me not to welcome the public gallery that we've got this morning, this afternoon. It's great to have members of the Auckland community coming along today, and we've got some public participation. So I believe we've got four speakers wanting to speak, and Fiona probably already told you that it's 5 minute and then there'll be some time for councillors to ask questions for clarification after that or during that 5 minutes. Yeah. So we've got a very tight schedule today, so I'm going to have to be a bit of a strict timekeeper and keep us to the 5 minutes. And Fiona's got a timer there that will go off. So I might quietly interrupt you if I can when there's a minute to go, just to give you a bit of a spiel. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, so I just want to go back to the conflict of interest and just put down 7.4. It's not really a conflict of interest, but my views have been put forward on my email as the attachment. So I should probably just abstain from voting on the actual resolutions, but stay in for that conversation.
Thank you, Councillor. So without further ado, I'll move into our public participation section, and I'll follow the order of the speakers that I've got here in front of me. So I've got Janet McDonald. Do we have Janet?
I'll be back to the end.
Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe at the end of the table, then everyone can see you nicely. Thanks, Jenna.
Right, yeah.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm here today to speak about the Te Anau Basin Development Plan. Unfortunately, engagement on this plan has been inadequate. A number of people, including myself, have surveyed businesses in the Main Street and others in Lions Park, friends and neighbours, and the consensus is that they mostly knew nothing about the plan or its development. The Southland District Council has outsourced the planning to WSP New Zealand Limited, a Canadian-owned multinational consulting firm, putting out cookie-cutter ideas which are being regurgitated worldwide. It smacks of anti-power ideology rather than a plan of originality, practicality and consideration of the uniqueness of the Te Anau Basin and its people. The plan they have devised for Te Anau looks like it could be anywhere. WSP stands to gain lots of work from the SDC, as each council project requires consultants and many other services, most of which WSP provide. WSP Global has 73,900 employees worldwide, 200,000 active projects on all continents, and as of October 2024 had cash available to be distributed to their shareholders of $14.44 billion. I counted 24 WSP offices in New Zealand alone and wonder why so many are required in a country with such a small population. WSP looks to be developing quite a monopoly. You as members and employees of the SDC have a fiduciary duty to all of us to act for our benefit, not the benefits of WSP's money-making objectives or any other company's benefit. It is not beneficial to me for the development and adoption of a plan restricting my travel to walking, cycling or taking a bus rather than driving. Your job is not to limit choice and freedom of movement. 5 minutes. Okay. The concept plan shows a redevelopment with virtually no convenient car parking in the main street. You have a responsibility to businesses and their customers not to impede freedom of movement and access for everyone, especially the elderly, disabled and very young. It is not in the best interest of the community for you to put a plan in place that will kill small businesses. Parking is already an issue in Te Anau, with workers parking all day in car parks designated 60 minutes. Workers are the backbone of the economy and life should be made easier for them, not harder. With plenty of car parks close to their work, they are not slaves. There is no reason to go to the expense of bulldozing the main street and other areas in Te Anau and replacing them unless it leads to better outcomes than the existing streetscape, creating more parking, not less. There will be significant tonnage going to landfill and replacement with concrete pavers as a result. But somehow WSP and SDC equates this to sustainability. The money for the plan development is coming from Milford Opportunities, which is tax money just like rates. Apparently, beyond the residue from Milford Opportunities, there is no money for the projects in the plan, yet the plan appears to have already begun. It seems quite a coincidence that trees have been cut down in Lions Park in Te Anau Terrace and opposite the Moose Barons Distinction Hotel in Lakeside Drive, as these places are earmarked for redevelopment under the plan. Under your fiduciary duty, you are required to give full disclosure. You have an obligation to be transparent and go the extra mile to inform people about the plan. The plan needs to be reviewed now, as I don't believe there will be opportunities to revisit and change it in the future.
1 minute.
As it seems counterintuitive to pay for a plan without the intention of following it. Your obligation to those who live in the area is not to bankrupt them through the creation of council debt, making them liable for your spending. It is not to impede their freedom of movement. You are legally and lawfully responsible to the men and women of this area to not harm them financially or otherwise, but instead, as per trust law, to act only in their best interest. Debt, bondage and serfdom are like slavery, very serious crimes that need to be given due consideration by yourselves in this process to potentially avoid any personal legal liability in both your public and or private capacities. My objective here today is to have the plan posted, returned to Te Anau and displayed in a prominent location such as the old H&J Smith building window or the Southland District Council building window in the main street. so that everyone can familiarise themselves with it over the Christmas New Year break. If you haven't already, there's a copy of the plan for you to familiarise yourself with when you go around the area. So I've given that to Fiona. Thank you.
Did very well getting a lot of content out in 5 minutes. You did very well getting a lot of content out in 5 minutes, so I'll let you catch your breath. But yeah, thank you very much.
It's been quite hard. Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time to come and present to us.
Thank you.
Next up on my list is Bruce Campbell.
Are we having questions?
Just with the time frame, councillor, if the presentation ends under 5 minutes, we'll have questions. But yeah, we're under quite a tight time frame, so the full 5 minutes was used for that presentation.
Thanks for the opportunity. I'd like to remind you councillors that you're elected by the people, for the people. I can't find any people that are in favour of this revamp of Tiana. I can't even find out who instigated the plan. I don't know whether it was the Milford Opportunities Group, and they're all people who lived out of town, or the consultants. And they certainly wouldn't know what the hell's going on in Tiana. One of their concepts was that a new business would move into Tiana. Well, how come we've got so many empty shops and businesses for sale? That was right. A transport hub. The transport hub needs buses. Buses need drivers, and drivers need somewhere to live. There's no rental accommodation in Tiana. There are businesses closed down because their staff could not get accommodation. It is now the time for the Southern District Council to look at commercial rating for Airbnbs that may free up accommodation for rentals. Past mayors have left ratepayers heavily indebted to infrastructure that haven't helped Tiana residents. Rona Cardino's legacy was the toilets. Gary Tongs was the airport, and both that we had to pay for. With this proposal to revitalise the town centre and the lakefront be your legacy, Mr. Mayor, on your way to bankrupting Tiana and Southland. It's now time to look back to the basics. The Southland District Council, it should not be in the tourism industry. The main focus should be infrastructure, roads, water, sewage and rubber. Otherwise we'll finish up like Wellington. It is unrealistic to expect ratepayers to continue to pay a large increase in rates for schemes that are not warranted or needed. Southland was built without consultants, so don't you think it's time to get rid of them and save the region mega bucks? Some of the buildings that were built way back before consultants are still standing, and they're well over 100 years old. You've only got to go and look at Cowdale Rivet and Wint, and they're all there. I've lived in Tiana for 53 years. I've seen a lot of money wasted by councils on harebrained schemes, e.g. the lakefront pier, the water garden and the broom paddock. Remember, when farmers are doing well, the province does well. And farmers aren't doing well, so tighten up your belts and stop wasting money on ideas that don't really need to happen. Thank you.
We've got a couple of minutes left. If you wanted to have some questions, Mr. Campbell, or there's 2 minutes left in there. Councillor Bowes.
Question for Mr. Campbell or Janet. I talked about the plan not being visible in Tiana. Do you know where it is visible?
Online, but what about the elderly people who can't look at it? And it's very hard to read, because if you look at it, it's blue on blue. It has to be, it's even on like A3, it's not that easy to read. And so why if everybody's so proud of it and it's been consulted and everything, isn't it like in a shop window or something on the large posters? I mean, that makes sense, because otherwise it's just buried in a back office somewhere.
Who knows where it's online? Yeah. Where does that information come from? How do you contact people in this day and age? The more connected we are, the more disconnected we are. Our papers are useless. I mean, how do you even get in touch with us? How do we get in touch with us?
How do you know you've got?
Sorry, Councillor, we won't get into debate with the gallery here. We'll keep the questions to the presenters next. So are there any further questions? None. I'll move on to our next speaker, which is Kylie Clintner, representing the Field and Business Association. Welcome, Kylie.
I feel very nervous today as this feels like a critical turning point for our airport users. A desperate last bid to try and get council to see how poorly run the airport has been for the last 17 years and action change. Great South have done a fantastic job of highlighting issues and problems and good things about our airport and a suggested planned approach for it. My name is Kylie Krippner. I'm an Aero Club member. I'm in the user group, a flying instructor. I operate a scenic flight and charter company from Te Anau, and I'm here today representing 90 local businesses for the Field and Business Association, and we all want the same thing, and that is a place here to be managed and operated as an airport by an accountable manager who's passionate and knowledgeable about aviation and business. Good things financially and culturally will follow. It would seem that after years of users speaking, SDC have not been listening. The current and prior airport managers have not enhanced the performance or culture of this place. And yes, the place has been hemorrhaging money. The prospect of services into the field, hangar homes, jet parking, etc., will bring instantaneous and much needed funds to this airport. So that will happen. But until people governing the airport at the top and the managers on the ground are accountable, there is a real chance that the money we've just spent will be for nothing and the status quo will remain. There's concern that the council is a little far removed from what is normal or typical of an airport culture. To operate the airport via SDC's own in-house staffing and operation hasn't worked. Contracting a third-party organisation also hasn't worked because the culture isn't typical or normal here for a well-functioning airport. This place is run extremely risk-overtly. The airport manager's positions, all of the positions should be tendered out like the cafe, but with a realistic timeframe for interested parties, say May the 1st. And it's nothing personal to the people involved in the airport. They can also apply under the tender for their jobs. We should be upskilling and improving what we've got. We've got passionate local people with masses of business and aviation experience in safety management, operations, business events and export. Southland District Council, we want change and we need you to action the change. After the passover from Great South back to the council, something needs to happen from this point onwards. I've got 3 questions. One, what's happening to the governance group, say from the 1st of January? Who's driving this? Will the management positions be tendered out? And is it going to be a CCTO or a CCO? Thank you.
Well, now we're getting to the debate in this forum, but I will I'll answer your questions in a bit of a sort of an overall cover in terms of we've got the Great South work is being undertaken until the end of this year. So in December, a report's going to come to council to talk about those next steps. So we don't know what those next steps are going to be yet in terms of the CCTO or anything like that. But there's a very strong desire from the governance group and council itself to not let things go backwards once that piece of work is finished. So we're also going to be looking at what the next part is going to be so we can continue momentum going forward. I think everyone shares what you said about making sure that the airport continues to move in a positive direction and gets towards becoming an asset. So yeah, I've broken my own rules by making a statement, but I just wanted to answer the questions that you asked there. And there's
You're not sure about the governance group. Will they continue to drive this next year?
I don't want to preempt the council decision. So the decision will be made at council in December, but the governance group's done a really good job to date. So I'd be surprised if they didn't carry on in some capacity in terms of making sure that that airport does carry on. There's about 10 seconds left, so I'll open it up quickly if there's a question from anyone. Councillor
Thanks, Carl. Just would you support that governance group carrying on into the new year? And
It needs to be driven
Good.
by good people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rather than nobody.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Colin. Right, now, our final speaker today, we've got Joy Crouchley and Chris Dale representing the Te Anau Waitangi Charitable Trust.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Apologies from Chris, he's been called out on the police matter. There's been an accident near Milford. So I would like to direct your attention to the screen, and I'm just going to sit down. The Te Anau Waitangi Charitable Trust is a group of 9 volunteers who have been running Waitangi commemorations in the Te Anau Basin for 7 years. The Trust's vision is to promote a culturally aware and responsive community by building an understanding of Māoritanga and activity or Waitangi. Growing community well-being, understanding and respect for the unique viewpoints of others underpins everything we do. We became a charitable trust in 2021. Since then, we have delivered a wide range of events. All our activities are inclusive, family-friendly, alcohol-free and free of charge. I think the increasing quite right. Te Anau is over 1.5 hours away from the nearest marae. The Waitangi Day and Matariki events in Te Anau are one of the primary opportunities for locals to learn more about the history and culture of Aotearoa New Zealand. We are not about competing with marae-based mana whenua-led commemorations elsewhere. Rather, we support them. As the festival continues to grow, we expect more visitors from outside the region to attend. There were approximately 9,817 engagements with our festival this year. It involved collaborating with 30 different groups from Southland. Since the event has grown from a one-day concert in the park to a week-long festival, an influx of out-of-town visitors stands to really benefit our community. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but we think that Te Anau holds the only annual Waitangi Day event within the Southland District Council region. Here is a short compilation video of this year's Waitangi Festival. Right, can you make that go for the intro? It's a wee movie, yeah.
Sorry, folks, we're just experiencing a bit of turbulence, but it'll be over soon.
This year, for the first time, we're facing having to trim our festival program due to a funding shortfall. Is there any way you could support us financially?
Thank you for that presentation. Did you get the email that I sent a while ago back in September when that government funding was available? Did that email come through? I forwarded it through to the trust back in September, so hopefully, but I'll have a chat with you. Sorry, like I say, it's we're under quite a bit of time constraints, so it'd be nice to have given you all a lot longer to talk, but under the time pressure we're under, we're going to have to carry on with the meeting. The first item that we got is 7.1 presentation of the health and safety certificate. It's on page 17 of your agenda. And we've got Michelle Burns and Graham Humphreys from Amenity Contracting here. So this is we hear in council a lot about needing to use local contractors and making sure that we're getting, and if we're using local contractors, we're going to get good work, we're going to get things done on time and on budget and things done really well. And I think this is a really good example of just that being done with a local Te Anau contractor that's been doing a lot of work out across the district, ranging from playgrounds to cemetery walls, and what else did we do? Yeah, quite a lot of work around the district, and just the staff have kind of pointed out consistent, great communication with stakeholders, council staff and the local community boards, regular toolbox meetings, the work area kept clean and tidy. The work undertaken has been completed well within budget, which we all love, and also in good timeframes as well, and also done to a high standard, which is so important. All the materials have been removed from the site and disposed of correctly. Good PPE being worn, good safety fencing, work vehicles positioned properly, and just general all-round good work ethic across the board. So this is the kind of stuff that we need more of around the traps, especially the on time and on budget. So I'd like to welcome Graham and Michelle to come up, and just got a certificate to present. So yeah, I'd just like to, on behalf of council, thank you very much for the great work that you've been doing. So there's a recommendation that we receive that report for that presentation, and that we thank Amenity Contracting for their great work. It's complete projects for council while sticking to the council's health and safety protocols. Someone happy to move that? Councillor Graney, seconded by Councillor Menzies. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you, and thank you once again to Amenity Contracting. Okay, our next report is the roading bylaw for Stewart Island. Parking and one-way amendments for hearing and submission. So we picked probably the furthest possible position away from Stewart Island today to hear their submission. So I don't think anyone's travelled in person to come and submit, but we've got people coming in online. So I'm going to hand over to Chris Rout from our policy team to do an introduction to this, and I'm going to cough, sorry. And then we'll move over to our submitters. So I'll hand over to you, Chris.
Thank you, and good afternoon, your worship and councillors. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Spot on. I just wanted to start by just sharing that between 10 and October and 10 November, council publicly consulted on the draft roading bylaw for changes on Stewart Island. Submitters were asked whether they were in support of the proposed parking restrictions and one of two one-way system proposals. Council received all up 46 submissions during this consultation period, and we also received 3 late submissions. Submitters were broadly supportive of the proposed parking restrictions and option 1 for the one-way system, which were both outlined in the draft bylaw. The large number of parking restrictions proposed did result in a wide spectrum of feedback being received that we will consider some further refinements when it comes to deliberations and adoption. And likewise, there is some feedback on option 1, which may require further consideration at a later stage. 5 submitters have requested to be heard on this matter today and are scheduled to speak at this meeting. Following today's hearing, Council hope to deliberate on this matter on the 11th of December, when the draft bylaw is presented for deliberation and adoption. Thank you, and I'll pass it back to Your Worship to hear from the speakers.
Thank you, Chris. And it looks like our first speaker, Graham Oakey, is online at the moment. Do you want to just do a sound check, Graham, and see if we can hear you all right? I assume you can hear us.
Yeah, I can hear you good. Thank you.
Good as gold. If you're ready to start, I can kick the timer off. So you got 5 minutes. And just for the team, the submission from Graham is on page 109 of your agenda. Ready when you are, Graham?
Thank you. Not a conflict of interest, but a reference in relation. I work for Fulton Hogan on Stewart Island, so my observations are based on A, being a resident, and B, working around the roads. If and when things are changed, the lineage for parking and no parking needs to be enforced, and we don't really want, well, I'd like not to see lines put in places that actually have no legal basis for being there. An example of that is Golden Bay Wharf. Quite a number of years ago, SDC staff asked me to put a yellow line. I don't know if you can see this or not. This is a picture. Is that visible to anyone?
Yep, someone can see that.
From the old steps along to the wharf edge, to stop people parking in that area, although it had no legal being to be there. I actually got to repaint it once, and then our local policeman one day decided to give a car parking on it a ticket, and then it was realised it wasn't a legal thing, and so I got asked to paint it out again in black, which we did. That's an example of sort of what happens if lines get put in place that don't have any legal bearing to be there. We've got a few of those up Main Road at present, and it doesn't help the situation, because what it tends to get to happen is things like this. Why the van or ute down the far end actually parked there when all the parking up the other side of the road was available?
You might just need to hold it up a little bit, Graham.
Hopefully I'm not shaking too much.
No, you're good.
Yeah, you can see the ute right down the end there. He's parked on a yellow line, which is a fully kosher yellow line. And then the other end of that area is, this is a bit of a Stewart Island special. In the distance, you'll see a car parked there, which supposedly is inside the yellow line or partially on it, which sort of makes a mockery of having the yellow line.
Might have to lift it up just a little bit higher.
That's it.
Cool. Gotcha, yeah.
Yeah, and according to our policeman, you can park inside a yellow line. I asked, I think it was Chris Rout when he was over about that, and he said, no, you can't, but it just seems to be the state of play on Stewart Island. Here's another one in a similar area. This is above the red shed. They managed to get 5 vehicles in there. There's supposed to be a footpath through there. That's, in my books, pretty disgusting. There needs to be a painted, delineated footpath and possibly space for parking, which might be 2 vehicles, I believe.
So you got 2 minutes left, Graham, just for your reference.
Yep, I'm getting through them. A good example of something that John there mentioned, and it was quoted in a newspaper article about vehicles parking and using the roadside as their extension of their commercial entity. This is outside the hall. You can hopefully see the grass growing on the pavers. I finally got to clean through here the other day, and I had to ask for the cars to be shifted back so I could clean the curb and the grass growing up in the pavers. Just about makes the job impossible, and certainly makes it take twice as long. I think that's just about it for the photos. Oh, sorry, one more. Observation Rock. What seems to be happening up there of late is the resident who lives in the driveway has started putting rocks out because he's sick of vehicles parking in front of his driveway, which I think is a legitimate.
Lift it up again, just we can just see the trees.
Sorry.
Yeah, cool, thank you.
I'm not quite sure what you can do there, but I think something needs to be done. considering the residents' concerns there. Did you get that one?
Yeah, no, so that, thanks, Graham. Yeah.
Radio, we've done it, yeah. And if they do anything in the parking side of things, it needs to be managed or policed or something like that. Whether it's the policeman on the island or parking wardens, I don't know. If SDC get the money, if the parking warden issues the tickets, I'm all for it. As opposed to the police. And that's really about my lot. I think we do have.
Cool, no, thank you, and right on time too. Cool,
Thank
no,
you.
thank you for that, Graham. Really appreciate that. Cool. So next up, we've got Bill Watt, and looks like you're there. Bill, can you hear us all right?
You're a little bit faint, but I'm otherwise fine, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you fine. So yeah, we're ready when you are. If you'd like to kick off, you've got 5 minutes. So it'll start when you start.
Oh, well, it sounds like the chase, doesn't it?
It does.
Just generally to support what Graham has just been talking about, I can tell you that rock he showed you at Observation Rock, I shifted the outer one myself a couple of days ago to where it currently is, having nearly hit it 2 or 3 times while avoiding the RJ's bus parked on the opposite side of the road, discharging its passengers into the carriageway. It's an accident waiting to happen. So generally speaking, I do support the need for parking restrictions and the need for their enforcement. Couple of riders on that though, I think we need to look at maintaining the walkability of the settlement here at Stewart Island. In planning terms, it's a very walkable settlement and that we can walk to many places in 10 or 15 minutes. Really good, the work that the community board's been doing, putting in walkways, but walking is so much part of the way of life here and the way of life for visitors, even though we have, I think the last estimate was over 800 cars on the island. Moving now to the one-way street proposal, I live on 10 Leonard Street, which is overlooks Patterson's Inlet. It's on the southwest side of Observation Rock. And I've supported the option 1, but only to the extent that you can do it without increasing speed. I see a lot of excess speed up and down that road. And it's not the visitors, I hate to say it, but it's the residents. And the older they get, the worse they get. But I do see vehicles coming past there too quickly. I did in my submission, I made some comments about the Sanford vehicle being parked at the top of a hill, again on the wrong side of the road. We discussed that in a neighbourhood get-together recently and felt that actually on balance it wasn't a bad thing because it was slowing the traffic down. So if you proceed with option 1 on Leonard Street, my submission would be it needs to be coupled with some form of traffic calming. But really take a step back. The present regime can be inconvenient, but is it unsafe? I have noted similar street widths. I'm not saying it's ideal, but I have noted similar street widths in places like Akaroa, parts of Dunedin, Kaiteri. We're not alone. So I was oppose option 2 for that reason. I think and a number of locals I spoke to believe that option 2 was put in place. Leonard Street and Excelsior Road would become a racetrack, and you'd be changing a situation from risk of minor inconvenience, perhaps a fender bender, into a risk to life and limb, and we want to avoid that. In my submission, I did offer a couple of options. As a resident, it would be nice if Leonard Street could be made a cul-de-sac, but I can see that's a bit difficult. There really isn't enough space for a decent turning bay. But I would commend the single track road like they have in Scotland as being another possibility in this kind of situation. Apart from that, those are my main points. I'm happy to answer any questions to my submission.
Cool. Thank you, and you've got just over a minute left, so we've got some time for questions. Do any questions for Mr. Watt? Councillor Duffy?
I think I saw in your submission, Mr. Watt, you're suggesting disabled parking outside the Four Square and the library, I think. Is there no provision for disabled parking now?
Not that I've seen, no, and I think that would be a useful thing. I'm aware of several people in the village who are, in a nautical expression, restricted in their ability to manoeuvre. They're dependent on their cars, they're on crutches. I think some kind of disabled or disability parking would be a good thing. But coming back to Graham's point on the earlier submitter, that would need to be policed.
Right, we've got 30 seconds left. Any further questions from councillors? There being none, I will thank you, Bill, for taking the time to come and submit. We really appreciate you not just writing in, but also coming in to speak in person as well. It's great, and it helps the process and helps us make an informed decision. So thank you.
Thank you very much for hearing me. Good.
Okay, so our next submitter is ready, I believe. Is he coming on?
Yep, Alistair.
I just sort my timer out. Bear with me while I deal with my signal.
Reconfirm the page number, please.
Page number for this one, sorry, is 151.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Alistair. Can you hear us all right? No, you're on mute. Are we able to unmute him from here? You're on mute if you can hear us, Alistair.
Where is he? Is it at the garage or the council office?
Can you ask to unmute? I don't know if you can hear us at all, Alistair, but
There
we
he
can't
is.
hear you.
He's there. Oh,
Do we have a phone?
just texted them.
Oh, there he goes.
Can't hear you.
No, I can't hear you. Sorry, Alistair. Has he responded to it?
I'll ring.
Yeah, maybe put him on speaker.
Tell him to go over to Canada. Oh, Kirsten's not there. Yeah. Oh, yes, she will be. She will be. Yeah. You want to poke?
Can you unmute your microphone, please, Alistair?
Not showing.
No, it's not showing his mute.
I think close to the council office.
Next door, if he's at the garage.
On his bike. Okay, let's
Oh,
put
is he on his
him on
bike?
speakerphone.
Yeah.
I've got him.
Yeah,
You
We're
talk. I've
that's
got you on
why.
speaker.
You got me on now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've got through my phone. Don't hang up. You're through my phone. You just hung up.
Maybe we will jump in the DC3 and fly to the
Runway's not long enough. Right, don't hang up.
Okay, you've got 5 minutes, Alistair, so hopefully we can hear you all right through Fiona's speakerphone. We might put it in the middle of the table maybe, and yeah, I'll start the timer up when you're ready.
Rightio, yeah, ready to go.
Cool, fire on.
It's not going to take 5 minutes anyway. It's going to be pretty simple and basic. My concern is for the elderly and those people that are pretty much immobile on the island. A suggestion, this has come to me after I put in my report, maybe 3 car parks at flights for people who are unable to walk, and also for people that are flown off for hospital or something like that. There's nowhere that they can park at the moment, and if they can't walk a distance and can't afford a taxi, they're pretty shocked. And the same with the wharf. There's maybe 3 car parks down there for people that are, challenged to walk any distance. And once again, disable car parks or whatever's necessary. Same with the library, same with the shop. Those sorts of places. I can't name the people, but I'd love to. But they cannot walk the distance, and this is going to be a problem if there's no parking set aside for them. Also, timing on the parks, is it going to be 24 hours, i.e. no parking or 30-minute parking or whatever, or is it going to be just a very 8 to 5 like most of the car parks are in town? That's a question. I'm not sure. So if people are flying up to hospital like I am tomorrow, I need to be able to park for the first flight out to the last flight back in front of flights. It's damned awkward if you can't do that. You've got to get somebody to run you there or to shift your vehicle, especially if you can't afford the taxi fare. So those are my main concerns, is providing for the people that need to be able to park close to those places.
Cool. Thank you, Alistair. And I'll just for those in the gallery that might not have heard that, Alistair's main concerns were around the elderly and those with mobility issues, being able to access parking closer to facilities. Do we have any questions from the table for Alistair? There being none, the previous submitter also had concerns around disabled parking as well, Alistair. So yeah, I think there's a bit of a theme coming in. Sorry, I'm looking at the screen and should be looking at the phone where I'm talking. But yeah, no, thank you very much. Last call for questions. There being none, I'll thank you very much, Alistair. We appreciate you taking the time to come in person, and yeah, even though technology didn't work, the plan B worked okay. So yeah, thank you for taking the time to share your voice with us.
Okay, thank you very much for listening.
Cheers, thank you. Okay, we haven't heard from Luke.
No, these two haven't responded to the messages that were left for them, so we're not going to be hearing from them.
Okay.
And I think in the case of Luke's, this is fairly clear in the what he was going to talk about is in the submission fairly clearly.
Just check that they haven't come in.
That's Simon.
So Simon Moran.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll.
Kirsten, you haven't got anybody sitting in the Rhode Island office wanting to join in?
We'll take that as a no.
Hasn't got Kirsten in the office either.
Okay, well, that was good to hear from those speakers, and it's good that we can have technology that we can hear from one end of the district to the other, and have people in person.
We've got those, and I'll put an extra one.
Yeah, cool. So, I guess before I move to our recommendations, are there any questions from the table for Chris or anything on the process? Pretty comfortable. We've got our recommendations here.
Just before you, Chris, when are you going to come back to the board with this?
The plan is to come back ahead of coming back to council. I don't think we'll hit a formal board meeting, so we'll have to make arrangements around that.
Okay, thank you. So this has been quite a thorough process. Sorry, I'll just tell myself to be quiet now. Councillor Duffy?
Oh, well, probably because I'm stupid and didn't pick it up, but I see that Dundee Street, there's sort of schools of thought about why it should be one way and schools of thought why that would be a disaster for individual people. So I'm just wondering, in the picture of what we're looking at, what are we doing with that? Or is it not really decided yet?
Well, I think at this point in time, we're just receiving the submissions, and
okay,
they will come through for them to be considered. Is that a sound answer, Chris?
That's correct, yes. We haven't decided yet.
Cool. So yeah, today we're just receiving the submissions, but we'll
I can speak to you afterwards.
Good. Yeah. So the recommendations that we've got here are receiving the report. We're determining that complies with our decision-making matters as usual. We're receiving all the written submissions and we hear the submitters who wish to be heard on the draft roading bylaw 2008 revision 3 2024. And then we also received 3 late submissions received after the closing of consultation on the 10th of November. And we're suggesting a new F here too, that we thank all of our submitters for both their oral and written submissions. It's good to have that feedback coming in from the community. And I'm more than comfortable with the late submissions. I'm just going to check I've got nothing over the page. No, I don't. Is there someone in the position to move motions? Councillor Duffy, seconded by Councillor Spraggan. Is there any further discussion on those at all? There being none, I'll put the motions A through to F. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you, and thanks once again to those who submitted.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chris. Getting the community board's watch of getting it done before Christmas. Okay, on theme of the community that we're in at the moment now is item 7.3, which is the Milford Community Trust Statement of Intent, which is on page 229 of our agenda, and looks like Simon's magically appeared on the screen.
Around it on light by the look of it from this end. Thank you for that. So yeah, this first report that we've got is, as it says, it's for your information, essentially from the decision of council.
Page 229.
For the decision of council last June to have the Milford Community Trust as an exempt CCO. This statement of intent doesn't need to be approved by council, but we did say at the time that we would continue to bring them along for council's information. There's only a couple of sort of key points in here, really. One is that, as has been the case for the last few years, the trust is still in a relative holding pattern, the key project being whether or not the recreation centre is going to proceed. Really, if there's that is still up in the air, and if there are any questions on the statement of intent itself, happy to try and answer those for you.
Thank you, Simon. I see the Booties come up to the end of the table too. Is there anything you wanted to add, the Booty?
No, thank you, Worship. Simon's covered it off well.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. And I think part of this is all part of that wider picture of Milford opportunities as well. And we're kind of in a bit of a waiting game, holding pattern, waiting to sort of hear an update, a very overdue update on what's actually going to be happening with Milford opportunities. So, yeah, are there any questions from the table at all? There being none, I'll take us. Oh, sorry, Councillor Menzies.
Just noting that we're waiting for the other report to come. Is there intention to bring this back for discussion once that occurs, or is that just going to be handled through the trust?
That's a good question, and that's probably actually worth potentially raising. Yeah, maybe making a B that once we hear some movement around Milford Ops, we bring it back. I'll just going to have a birdie quickly. I'll go to you, Councillor Duffy.
Your Worship, the trust has adopted the statement of intent. Council is receiving it for information.
Right, cool.
And so I suspect they won't do a change, not for this year. So whatever happens would be the next year's statement of intent that you would look at. So I can't see it coming back is what I was saying.
Yes.
Sorry, you go.
Just no, I realise that doesn't require our approval, but there is an interest there, yes, I guess, in relation to what they are thinking once that other report comes in. So, mind you, it might be that long before we hear what the next steps are.
Okay. Councillor Duffy?
I just wondered what the issues are around the possibility of a facility for staff in Milford in terms of a community recreation area. Like, I mean, obviously an issue will be money, but is there some canvassing of need, or where is anything happening while this delay is going on to sort of see where that's progressing?
I might look at the previous chair of the Milford Community Trust to share some information on that, if you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, look, the trust is in a weird position because there's not really trustees right now. At the time that the statement of intent was delivered, the intention of the trust was to kick back into gear the community shared space recreation centre project. It's been held up for lots of different reasons. The one that keeps getting cited is we need to wait for more clarity of Milford opportunities. There's a lot of that information around natural hazard risk assessment that came out of that. However, the trust wants to crack on with something and basically kick back into gear the project as it was pre-COVID before it all stalled. But the advice it's receiving is to hold fire. One of the important things worth connecting, like to comment on what is the appetite for it? One of the last community meetings with the Milford Opportunities Project that I went into as part of the trust, there was, and I've got the notes actually in front of me. I can't send them because there's no internet here, but I can forward through, was the community sentiment around the importance of having the trust as a governance structure for shared facilities and the importance of having a shared facility, and the hopes that those comments would make it through to the Milford Opportunities advice to Cabinet. At the time the statement of intent was done, though, it was sitting in a holding pattern of let's wait till we hear what's happening in June, not charge operators until December, readdress it then. We're in close to December and there's still no idea what's coming from MOPS. So there was at the time a lot of frustration from the trustees, and as you've seen in the next report, there's only one trustee left standing. So there's absolutely still the need for something, and there's absolutely still the need for a facility for the people, particularly the workers working in Milford. But powers greater than the trust are the reasons that they're being told to hold off. But there's a lot of background work already done. There's a whole community facility project scoped, designed architecturally there. Doc has indicated there's a space for it. So the statement of intent is crack on with it. The situation of the trust is it's almost at a point of dissolution, almost by circumstance. So, I mean, I'd encourage some pressure on getting some answers of what's the outcome of Milford Opportunities, because the likes of the trust are sitting there waiting to do something, and there'll be another season in Milford and the workers will have nowhere to socialise in between work. So
yeah, there's a lot of people waiting on this outcome of Milford Opportunities, whatever that may be from Wellington. So, and
it's the last time council received the statement of intent, there was also some rhetoric around the nature of Pepeatahi and the people in there, and statements of there's lots of transient workers, but the reality is there's a community in there. Yeah. In the summer, there's 300 people working there. That's the size of a small rural town anywhere in the district. So there is a community, there is the need for representation, and there's a need for, like we have community halls in other towns, there's something there. And the community, the workers, the veterans that have been there lots of times, lots of seasons, and also some of the newcomers have all identified how important it is, and they just want to see some action.
Yeah. My two daughters working there at different times over 30 years ago, or about 30 years ago, and there was a need for it then. So, yeah.
Cool. So we've got a recommendation there that we'll receive the report. Someone happy to move that recommendation? Councillor Spraggan, seconded. Councillor Menzies. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That's carried. So staying right on the theme of Milford Community Trust, this is on page 241 of your agenda. I'll hand back over to Simon.
Thank you again. So yeah, a number of these things have just been touched on in the last discussion. So the three things in here, obviously noting the situation of the trust in terms of its trustees, and the resignation of the chair. The second one being a question for council as to whether it wishes to defer the appointment process. As noted in the paper, normally this isn't, at this point in time, it's not something that we would bring to council to ask them whether we go out and advertise or not. It would just happen, but because we're in this situation with a number of trustees now, or trustee roles now vacant, and the outcome of government's decisions on the Milford Opportunity feasibility work still up in the air, really decision needs to be made by council is I guess is the trust as a CCO, and then also just in one of those things that was just talked about, which was the invoicing of operators. Again, it is in the statement of intent that it would that revenue for the second half of the financial year is anticipated, but as Councillor Wilson just said, the trust was going to come back and revisit that depending on how far they'd got with sort of firming up what was happening with the recreation centre. That hasn't progressed any further, and so I talked with Roscoe Gowden, who's the last trustee, and he was comfortable with the idea that it would be better not to invoice the operators at this stage, as the money wouldn't actually be going to a tangible activity. It would just simply be going to sit in the bank account of the trust at this point in time. So yeah, asking for council to agree not to invoice or send those invoices out to operators for the second half of the financial year. Just in relation to interest in the outcome of MOP, just note that there was an article in the ODT on the weekend as well, which was about operators awaiting the decision of government on the master plan as well. So everyone's certainly looking to see what the answer to that will be. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Simon. And I think I don't think anyone's got this. I think the community aspect of Milford that Matt touched on is very important, and I think almost our role as community representatives is to make sure that doesn't get lost in whatever kind of structure comes forward inside the revised Milford Inc. And I think it's important to keep this trust alive for now, to look at and see if we can fulfil that role, or what role that may be. When that future comes in, it's hard not knowing what that's going to look like, but I definitely see some value in this, and I think I agree in terms of the holding back the invoices for the remainder of the financial year, which is just another 6 months, so there's not that much time left, so that's not going to have a significant impact on anything. And I think it might be time to start sharing some of that frustration up at Wellington and getting some pressure on to try and get an outcome here, because there's a lot of people, and there'll be people's businesses and livelihoods waiting on this outcome as well. So it's very important. But I'll hand over. We have discussed a lot of this in the previous item, but are there any further questions for Simon or anything anyone wants to discuss? Yeah,
I just wanted to comment on just put some context to the resolution to include a Mararoa Waimea ward councillor back into the trust deed. For clarity, it was actually reinstating that provision from the original deed. It had been removed, and it was conflicting information within the present trustees at the time, in the recent deed adjustment of whether that was intentional or just a kind of a byproduct that happened in the process. So that provision is back in the trust deed. And to clarify, my resignation from the chair role based on the ability of that independent side of the chair role was the reason. If the trust is to continue and for the remainder of the triennium, I would still be happy to be part of that group, particularly with the conversations already gone on with Doc regarding the community centre and the space that has been allocated if it was to go ahead.
Yeah.
However, I'm also, I'm happy to not be there. I don't see it appropriate to sit in this role as independent chair, and would recommend elsewhere for that.
Thanks, Matt. And I'm just going to propose that we add a new G to this as well. And I realise you did the chair in your personal capacity, so we'll thank Matt Wilson rather than Councillor Wilson, but just like to acknowledge the work that you have done in that role as chair during your tenure in there. So I'd like to add that in, that we thank you for and acknowledge your work. We've got our recommendations there. So we're noting the resignation of Matt Wilson as chair. We're approving deferring the process for appointing trustees to the Milford Community Trust until the government has released its decisions on the Milford Opportunities Project and considerations from any decision have been assessed. And we also approve not invoicing operators for the remainder of the 24-25 financial year, noting that that financial year ends in June, as the uncertainty about the recreation centre project is not yet resolved. Someone in a position to move that? Plus money that I added myself. Someone happy to move? Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Graney. Is there any further discussion on that? There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? That is, and Matt's going to abstain. I'll declare that carried. Thank you. Right, item 7.5. So this is on page 249 of your agenda. And this is the appointment of the director to Milford Sound Tourism Limited. So very Milford Sound themed afternoon. And I believe Vibhuti is going to speak to this one.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of things to highlight, I suppose. Council has its own policy on appointment of directors to CEOs. There's nothing substantial in terms of change from what it had to the new policy, so this appointment just follows that. That is it for me, Your Worship.
Yeah.
Happy to take questions.
And this is essentially just carrying on that process that came through the executive. Apologies for this call. Executive committee, and it's just following through that process, and we've had the recommendation for a director there. So yeah, are there any questions on the table? It's a pretty straightforward report. So our motion there is that we are agreeing to appoint Mr. Cameron McIntosh as a director of Sound Tourism Limited for a term of 3 years. And that we delegate the authority to the Mayor for the signing of any notices required under the Constitution of Milford Sound Tourism Limited to be delivered to the Secretary of Milford Sound Tourism Limited. So if there's no discussion on those, I'll ask if someone wants to move A through to E. Councillor Menzies, seconded. Councillor Spraden. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against?
I'm going to abstain on this as well.
Yep, Matt will abstain. I declare that carried. Congratulations, Mr. McIntosh. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Mayor's report, which I'm going to take as read. And we've got a very patient chairman from the Northern Community Board that's sitting over there in the corner. And I just wondered if Greg might like to have a chance to update the table with what's happening out in the northern space.
Yeah, thanks.
Maybe if you come up to the end of the table, might be if you can squeeze in there.
Hey, Greg Tyler, Northern Community Board Chair. Yeah, this is just an update for the councillors on what's happening in our patch. We're a rural, quite a large area, contains Garston, Ethel, Mosburn and Lumsden, 4 small country towns. We've got a fairly proactive board, what's been happening in our patch. Up at Garston, good to hear the new ablutions or the toilets have arrived on site. The non-compliant septic tanks have been removed and new ones put in, and that should be all operational by the 15th of December, they tell me, so that's pretty good planning for Christmas. Also in Garston, the McNamee subdivision, there was a road extension that's been completed for that subdivision, and the Presbyterian Church is celebrating 100 years service there, so that's a big effort for a small country area. we didn't bring glasses, though. The farming community was hit pretty strongly or pretty tough in the spring with the wet weather events, and so the farming community and the contractors were under quite a bit of pressure in our area, but it was good to see that we had New Zealand Beef and Lamb come on board and done a shout at the local, and Active South, and also put on an activities day for the kids, the farmers, for a coffee and a barbecue, which was nice to see happen in our area. We recently held a workshop just on our projects that going forward 25-26. So the board's decided to stall on it, or put out a couple of projects that we didn't feel needed done right now. So the painting of the Lumsden Hall has been pushed out, and also the painting of the railway station and the recladding has been pushed out, and most of that's because of the Lumsden Heritage Trust got to do some work in that space. We'll take it on board after that. Also, that meeting was a review on the footpaths, and unfortunately NZTA's funding has been about quartered, and which you probably know. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. But we had to make a decision on what renews we wanted to do. So Mosburn have opted to replace some footpaths that are in dire straits and need a repair, and they're going to fund that out of the reserves. In the Lumsden area, we've only gone with what's being funded, and that's a wee bit along Flora Road, but there's not much. It's not a big area, and the funding's pretty limited. So not sure where we're going in the future with that space, but yes, we got going on. Oh, the Lumsden playground, we had some feedback about fencing the new playground. So we did put it on the SDC Facebook page to engage how strong of how strongly that was felt by our ratepayers and users. We had quite a range of responses, all the way from Auckland, if you believe. They thought we should fence it, but yeah, they were not quite footing the bill for it. So at this stage, with talking to the ratepayers of Lumsden, it was going to fall on their rates if it was going to be fenced. They'd like it fenced, but they don't want it on their rates. So we're going to hold off on that for now. If there was a funding stream comes on, possibility of picking that up, we might relook at that. So yes, and the only other thing, just like to acknowledge the passing of Des O'Brien, long-standing farmer in Garston, who's Councillor Tom O'Brien's father. He's passed away earlier this week, and we'd just like to pass our condolences on to the O'Brien family. And yep. So that's us for all the Southland.
Thank you, Greg.
So is there any questions?
Yeah, are there any questions for Greg? We're going to let him sit down and get away with it. No, thank you, Greg, and it's great hearing from our board chairs and what's happening and around our 9 community board areas, and it's good to see some great work being done. Are there any questions on my mayor's report? Councillor Byers?
Thank you, Your Worship. I see you met Minister Simeon Brown, and he was involved. I think you were part of the mayoral group that went to Wellington a few months ago, saying we had a funding problem in the councils. This is in light of the accelerating debt levels. Excuse me. And we'll notice that this council's up to nearly $160 million worth of debt. I'm wondering if you talked to Simeon Brown about this issue that local government's facing, bearing in mind he suggested that each council go through their expenses line by line. rather than going to the government for funding. Did you talk to him about this particular issue?
In a roundabout way through, you'll see the presentation that I gave to the Minister on, it was focused around the importance of our roading, which comes down to our funding because we're ultimately paying twice for our roads, particularly in the rural space. So yes, the pressure that our ratepayers are under was definitely discussed, and the projected debt levels and the dissatisfaction and the fact that we do not accept as a council that in year 10 of our long-term plan we're going to be at that level of debt. So yes, to answer your question, yes, that has been raised with the Minister and multiple people too. I was up in Wellington last week as well, and talking to a number of people around the whole sector of local government is in the same boat of facing that funding challenge, and there does need to be a change in how things, and the continual money requests for funding coming down from government, like the new levy that's going to be imposed on us to charge for water services going forward. So another tax that's going to fall on local government and our ratepayers to have to fund. So we're going to need to push back on that one as well. So they might be telling us on one hand to be going through our budgets line by line, but they're also increasing our expenses by imposing new levies and taxes that we have to collect on behalf of the government from our ratepayers. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but the advocacy is strongly carrying on, and you'll see the letter and the presentation in there as well with that kind of a thing.
Okay, well, thank you. I noticed that well, it was hard to miss, but July and August, this council took on an extra $20 million of external debt. When is this council going to go through its expenses line by line and consider a change that I think you alluded to there?
Well, as you'll know, Councillor, we do that as part of our long-term plan, our annual plan process. It's part of what we do, and we're going to be doing our annual plan coming forward. So we're going to be going through all of our budgets through that. So that's part of what we do.
Well, I think unless there is a change, the debt levels are going to keep increasing.
But that's up to us to make that change around this table. Are there any further questions, Councillor Byers?
Yes, one more, Your Worship. You met with LGNZ and Tamata ROI. Was there any discussion around the issue around treated wastewater to land?
Yes.
Is that likely to, was there an indication given that that's likely to change?
So Tamata ROI at the moment are working through defining the standards for wastewater treatment that's going to come out in March next year. So I had a one-on-one meeting with their CEO to point out Southland's environment that we're in with our 19 wastewater plants, and some of them in very small towns. If we look at Balfour as an example, 75 connections, and the proposed costs around that. So my call out to Tamata ROI was I had an open invitation to discuss with our staff prior to writing the standards, to have a look at situations like we're facing in Southland to make sure that we're not getting a one-size-fits-all or something that's not going to be applicable to our unique situation down here, and we're not going to be putting that kind of a load on our ratepayers. So there's quite a big differential between the different types of standards. So the Chief Executive.
Just to add, I believe they listened to the Mayor because I think they're coming to see us in a couple of weeks to find out the situation.
So do you know when they're going to make a decision around this? Well, they haven't given any indication.
Well, March is the indicative timeframe at the moment. Cool. So if there's no further questions, we do need to press on with the agenda. We've got an important writing workshop, so I will ask if someone would like to move and receive my report. Councillor Graney, is there a seconder? Councillor Menzies. All those in favour, please say aye.
No.
Anyone against?
Sorry, Rob, I should have asked this before. The letter to Simeon Brown, which is very good, has it gone to him?
Yeah, no, that's been received. So he received that prior to that presentation I did. Okay, so I will declare the meeting closed, and we have a workshop with Hartley now, who is hopefully in the building. Do we want to stretch our legs for 5 minutes before Hartley picks up?
Yeah.
And especially considering that over the next sort of 24 months, we've got in the roading space, pretty much all of our contracts are coming up for renewal, or at least a rollover for one or two of them. So really good opportunity to start the conversation. I think I might have previously, as I mentioned, around, particularly alliance contracts have been around for a while and need to look at renewing them in the coming years. But I sort of, hopefully it works. Not working. Did we? No? That's not on the laptop. Oh, there we go. So, yeah. So I thought I'd start off just with the basics, maybe about the road. We often talk, good with acronyms and different aspects of the road. So generally what makes up a road, we've got the road corridor, that's sort of the legal width, generally fence to fence, but sometimes it can be outside of that because fences have crept in, or we've got 40-metre wide roads. We don't really build 40-metre wide roads.
So that includes the road reserve and
yeah. So when we talk about the road corridor, that's the full width, the legal aspect of the road. And then we have the road verge. And then what we term the water table. Sort of, you can see these two examples, left-hand, right-hand side. They don't always have nicely formed water tables, just depending on topography. And then what we term the formation with, that's the actual built-up component of it. And something's gone second there. And then we have what we term the carriageway or seal width. That's, or unsealed. That's a bit that you generally end up driving on. And the form shoulder, where if you want to pull off to the side of the road, that's normally grass or gravel. The road itself is made up of what we've termed subgrade. That's sort of the natural formation. And then subbase is where we actually start building onto the road. And then as you slowly, then you have the base course is sort of the next layer. And then your sealed or top surface, often steel or asphalt, or a running course for a gravel road. So I just thought I'd do a quick intro on, we often talk about what's a road corridor or carriageway or shoulders, and it's been appreciated because of topography. It's not always that way. Urban roads, you've got curb and channel, so there's a few variations, but that's hopefully a basic overview of what it looks like.
So it's the only difference between a tar seal road and a gravel road, that top layer, is everything else pretty much the same?
Oh, it can be, yeah. Yeah, we use a smaller aggregate on top. Sometimes you may just have, you won't have as much of a sub base, so the depth can vary as well. But even on sealed roads, the depths vary depending on how much traffic, the type of traffic, the underlying ground conditions, they're all taken into account. So the road activity, thought I just, because of the funding changes and the way it's categorised, I thought a good opportunity to cover off. We talk about the local road operations, so we may hear the government talk about local road operations. So those are the activities. So it's the general structures maintenance, so that's painting of bridge, deck clearing, that sort of the basic type stuff. Environmental maintenance, that's where you do verge spraying or things like any ice grit, that sort of activity is classified under that. Network services, that's generally our asset management, where some of our time and costs go to. So the general those looking after the network and the input of managing the network when it's not directly associated with the project. We also include level rail crossings, not that we generally spend a lot of money on that, but some of the pre-warning stuff, and then the other aspect is covered by Kiwi Rail. And then minor events, so if we have a minor slip or minor, even if it's just minor flooding, surface flooding, then we have to put signs out. Structures components, so that's when we talk about structures component, that's major, say replacing a deck or a pile or a beam, so it's the more the bigger sort of pieces of work. Traffic services, so that's signs, lighting, pavement marking, those are sort of activities we're talking about when we talk about traffic services. And then emergency works in general, so you end up with larger scale events, and if we like the 2020 floods is probably a good example of, we code that to emergency works and apply for additional funding because of the scale of the event. Then there's the local road pothole prevention fund that sort of gets spoken about, and that's predominantly around sealed road maintenance, unsealed road maintenance, so grading, pothole stabilization, so more major patch repairs on our sealed roads. Unsealed road methane, so that's putting new gravel on our unsealed roads, resurfacing work, drainage, so that's sort of the bigger expenditure capital items for some of those, as well as the pavement rehabilitations, where we're rebuilding effectively existing road that's come to its end of its life, and we're spending too much maintenance money on it. Bridge renewals, and as well as walking and cycling, generally that's only footpaths, and we heard earlier today we didn't get a lot of funding in that category. Good moves. So how do we deliver all of that? So we've got 3 road and alliance maintenance contracts. We've got 2 pavement marking contracts. We've got 2 sealed. So these are generally longer term contracts. So we've got 2 sealed road contracts. At the moment, it's a little bit different because we've got a 3rd contract for Stewart Island. But that's only about once every 14 years. We resurface the island. Pavement rehabilitations. I should probably say those top 3, they're tend to be longer term contracts. So anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Lances are a bit longer. Pavement rehabilitation, they're on a season by season and site by site, or we may group 1 or 2 sites together if they're in close proximity. And depending on where the gravel sources may come from. Street lighting, that's also a longer term contract. So that's if the street light goes out, replacing of those, or even a couple of new street lights that may be installed, we do under that. And then bridge replacement generally depends on where it is. We may package them up, smaller, like-sized bridges. We might put them into a package, and then if they say a larger 1 or 2 bridges, again depending on location, may look at putting them together. So it does vary across the district depending on where and what sort of projects there are. And then minor projects, they generally are safety, maybe an intersection improvement. They could be lumped in with, say, pavement rehabilitation if it's the same site, or maybe a standalone project. Just comes down to what sort of project it really is. We also have professional services support. So we've got a structured services. So one of the requirements is that we do structured inspections, the annual bridge posting reports and inspections, that sort of activity. Or if we have events and it might be a crash that's occurred at a bridge, and we need a structural engineer to go and inspect that bridge and give the okay that nothing structurally has happened with that bridge as a result of a crash. Design, so that's our pavement rehabs. There's a bit of work involved with those, so to survey, design work, getting the documents potentially ready for tender. So, some of that we also do in-house. Resurfacing contract, that's the management, supervision, quality assurance of that. That's got specialist technical knowledge around that. And then also just our modelling and development of our forward works program and support around asset management. And then also road safety, we have shared services where we can. In case of road safety, that's within the Colville City Council and Gore District Council around our road safety promotion. So that's a lot of time, the Lancers, Fulton Hogans or South Roads sort of do all of it. There's actually, through the contracts, there's quite a lot that get delivered and procured outside of those Alliance contracts. The Alliance contracts generally look at call it the day-to-day activities. So as I have there, I won't go through all of them. Your unsealed road, grading, metaling, structures, the painting or removal of debris around bridges, that sort of thing. For the northern one, it also includes around the Mount Cycle Trail, spraying, that sort of activity, as well as any emergency responses, whether that's a crash, flooding, all of those sorts of activities. And then some traffic services, the likes of your signs, but as you said, street lighting as an example, or pavement marking, they're separate contracts again. They sit outside of those Alliance contracts. So how do we, I suppose, manage those contracts and what do we do? So for your Alliances as an example, we get monthly A3 reports. We utilise some of that information that comes up to council through our combined transport A3 reports. SDC, in our case, contract roading managers, they're out auditing, doing 10% audits or even through our project delivery team for the road construction, they'll be auditing the activities that are going on.
So 10% audit is
of the network, just going out for a drive, what's been done, getting a snapshot of actually work undertaken. We have the roadwork survey. While there's, as part of the auditing, we get done once a year. Council staff go out and take a snapshot, which are just in the process of doing. So you get a snapshot annually of the full unsealed road network condition across the district. And we do that on an annual basis around the same time, so try and build up a bit of a picture so you can try and rule out seasonal variations or weather conditions and try and be quite constant around what road void is. Good question. Yeah, so road void, it's effectively, well, it's an app on the phone that we utilize, and it calculates roughness based on an international roughness index. And so we calibrate beforehand so everybody's the same. And it's uploaded to a cloud, and there's a system. You basically choose which roads. Obviously, we do it for this time of the year across the district. It calculates different bands, what's good, average, bad.
You say it's just an app?
It is an app, yeah, but it's on the phone, yeah. Yeah, it's specifically developed for unsealed road, and it is used across the world in various places.
So rather than going out doing picking the road, can that not be implemented in all vehicles that start out on the road in Metro?
So we do use, we've got dedicated phones on it. One of the things is your mounts that you use over time fatigue. So if you're not really paying attention, the rubber mounts for mounting phones, etc., can influence the results. So you have to be very mindful of calibrating and ensuring that all components are correct. Otherwise, you start getting false readings.
I suppose every vehicle has a different suspension anyway.
Yeah, so, but we use it, it's not just used for the 2 weeks once a year, we actually use it throughout the year, but we just once a year nail it down to 2 weeks and take a snapshot. Because there's things like seasonal variation, we've only driven certain roads, may not be representative of the entire network. So yeah, during the year, we're still collecting the data. It's not just used as a one-off. We use independents. Brian Smith, he comes in, does financial auditing of our alliances. We don't do every alliance every year, we swap it around. So every 3 years, each alliance gets a financial audit. It provides a bit of independence, can compare contract rates with other parts of the country. What are we paying? How does that compare? Is it within, call it industry standard? And then you have the NZTA. There's still lots of audits that they do. Depends on how good or how bad you've been, depends on how often they audit you. Also depends on the size of the actual expenditure. So we're around every 3 to 4 years just because of the size of our expenditure. So one's a procedural audit, the other one's a technical audit. So procedural audit is how well are you following the rules, your procurement policies, how do you do your procurement, your accounting, your claiming, that sort of thing. The technical audit is actually going out on the road and then seeing how you're implementing, I suppose, your plans, your activity plans, etc., around good practice and standards.
So how much of that is a percentage of their roading budget? Does that gobble up?
The NZTA audits. We don't pay for the NZTA audits other than our time.
So that's all done by you?
So the NZTA procedural audit and technical audit.
No, I mean the whole, everything on that page. How much is a percentage of roading budget? Is that?
I'll stop my head, I don't know. I can tell you, I haven't gone and tallied it up because we don't, like the Alliance leadership team, where, as an example, we don't pay additionally for that. That's part of like my time, Fran's time, as an example. So we don't necessarily charge out our time. That's a overhead cost. Some of the aspects like probity, as far as I can comment on probity, we don't use probity on every single contract that we procure. Depends on the value of the contract or the risk associated with the work that we want to undertake. But probity can cost somewhere around $20,000 to $30,000. But if you're talking a $17 million contract, from a risk point of view, potentially good money spent, because you don't end up in, or reduce the risk of ending up in litigation and that quickly cheaper $20,000 or $30,000. And things like the road efficiency group, that doesn't cost us other than time again. That's utilising data that we already have to report on as part of a funding requirement, like our expenditure, traffic management costs, etc. And they're utilising NZTA data to pull information out, and then you can have a look at how we do, say, cost per kilometre, how do we compare to similar peer groups across the country. So it's a way of, I suppose, managing and seeing how how councils are doing, respective councils. If you want to see how much you pay per kilometre for an unsealed road, how does that compare to Luther District as an example? Yeah.
When we see reports coming to us, those fortnightly reports, and we notice continually about the road signs being vandalised and put up, is that within the contract that's awarded? So there's an expectation at a certain level will occur and they will address those. And that's the same for when we get a call in to say there's mud and all sorts of things over the road, wet season with farmers coming out with their tractors and putting it over the road. That's all already in the contract.
Yeah, so that also say a request for service comes through, or middle of the night or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they'll go to our last contractors. Say mud on the road, for example, or gravel's been spilled for whatever reason, just go and sweep an intersection. Yep, that goes straight to our contractors. Yeah, so the system's all set up.
Yes, some of that information I think would be useful to go out to the public, like in 1 year, how much have we paid to reinstall road signs that have been knocked over by someone driving around for a lark overnight, as opposed to an accident type thing.
Yeah, so we have done a bit of work on that in terms of the signage, especially around the vandalism, to try and sort of raise awareness around what is it actually costing ratepayers. Some of the other activity can be a bit more difficult to judge. I'll pick on each market post, whether they've been accidentally driven over or somebody's purposely gone wide and driven over a whole bunch of each market posts. It's not always that easy to tell if it's purposeful vandalism or just accidental vandalism.
So the road sweeping partly, is that part of the contract, or is that additional cost?
So with the alliance contracts, we'll get onto it, but with the alliance contracts, they're cost reimbursed contracts. So while there's, I'll pick on the grading, for every kilometre we grade, there's a cost for grading, and when they grade, we pay. If they don't grade, we don't pay. So there's activities like we call them cyclic trucks that are out and about. So they're looking for potholes, signs that are down. They've got brooms on the front, so they'll sweep intersections. So the busier roads, they do sort of beats on to stay on top of that. So yes, you pay for it, but it's not, unless it's a call out, and it's part of the routine route that they're going, that it'll get done as part of being out on the network. Where obviously if it's a call out and they have to redivert to, either they're not doing something or it's an additional cost to travel somewhere else. So I'll pick on the grading as probably a good example. I'm not trying to uplift the grader to go and address every RFS if we can help it. Helps with efficiency and effectiveness, where if we've got to keep on uplifting the grader from one spot, moving somewhere else, we become quite inefficient, the costs start going up. And then it means that the grader can't get around on its beat and we have to bring other resources in potentially to catch up. So often if we'll get RFS, say for a road that's got potholes or might have some corrugation, depends on when the grader's away. They might say, oh, the grader's got to be there next week. Can it hang on and go and see, can we wait till next week and the grader's actually going to get there? In some cases you can't, and we may have to redirect resources. But ideally that's sort of the best scenario, is to just stay on its beat, is what we call it. I suppose, the other aspect is quite a bit of legislation to pull in the rules that we have to work under. The Local Government Act, Land Transport Act, a few, and then government procurement rules, health and safety, NZTA rules. Part of the NZTA procurement is because NZTA is a government organisation. They have to adhere to the government procurement rules and we get funding from them. So it sort of all flows down, as well as council's own procurement manuals and procedures. Often a subject comes up, why can't we bring services in-house? Probably the biggest one is the Land Transport Management Act that says, it's a bit of highlighted in bold, that outputs must be purchased from external suppliers. So that's the biggest reason why we don't have a whole bunch of standalone or internal services like grading or road construction crews for ourselves that we can send out and do the work.
Partly that, so the road control authority,
that's us,
can't do work internally. It all has to be
We can do some minor, I mean, like a project delivery team, some of my team, we would cover some of the minor stuff, you can, but the rest has to be very much external. Yeah.
Any idea when that changed from fire to like?
I'd say 1989, I'd say somewhere in there. I don't have to be correct on that, but I'd say somewhere in that vicinity. I mean, a lot of road controlling authorities sold off their construction arms.
Yeah.
You do still have some road controlling authorities that have construction arms. Whitestone Contracting is probably a good example of that for Waitaki, but they have to compete on the open market for the work. Yeah, so we technically can have a CCO or organisation, but you have to compete on the open market against everybody else. Yeah. So I suppose I'm not saying you can't, or local authorities can't have it, but it has to operate as a standalone or compete just against everybody else, just like Fort Hogan or South Roads or Downer or Anau Earthworks or yeah.
Does that apply to aggregate material supply?
Yeah, I'd say it would. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so yeah. It does talk about sort of your minor auxiliary works, but I would doubt that. I think our lances alone are probably around 60,000 cubes a year of gravel, so it's a reasonable own for that minor. And then also, I suppose, around how we're actually delivering business. There's a 17A review, and I know for various aspects of council over the last few years, we've gone through that process. Roading's no different, and we're up for a 17A review. We've got some major contracts coming up. I sort of already touched on this around the government procurement rules. While Council itself isn't a government organisation for the transportation activity because they get funding from NZTA, they're a transportation activity. They're a government organisation. They're subject to those rules, and part of our funding requirement is that we follow those rules. So some of the key aspects there is about, you've got to plan and manage, and hence why those sort of forward works programs and modelling that we do. Even our business cases that we do when we're doing our pavement rehabilitation, we have to use net present value calculations to justify why we're actually selecting that piece of road that we're doing. The business case stacks up, and then also being fair to all suppliers. So it's about open market and transparency around how we procure. Fine. Well, too much on that. So what I say from a procurement process point of view, so that's a very simplistic diagram. Comes out of the NZTA's procurement manual around how we sort of go around when we actually want to procure services. So sort of consider the context, what delivery models there are, suppliers, and then ultimately a contract. So it's a different way of I suppose viewing it. When you look at the delivery model, you have price, then the trade-off between price and quality, or just going purely on a quality proposition. So the price is generally a lowest price, what we term lowest price conforming. So there's criteria that you have to meet. As long as you meet that criteria, whatever the lowest price is, that will be a successful supplier. Pavement rehabilitations are probably a good example of that. They generally tend to be lowest price conforming tenders. So the lowest price, you generally, as long as you conform and you meet all the criteria, you'll be successful with that contract. And then there's a trade-off, depends on the complexity of the job, price quality, and you may say it's a 70-30 or 50-50, so you can have different ratios of where you want to place the quality or where you place value on quality versus the value of the price. And part of that's sort of a risk assessment on how complex the job is or what the risks are, where do you want to transfer that risk. And then there's the quality aspect. Quality is quite an interesting one. If you want to go 100% quality for a construction project, NZTA consider that to be advanced procurement. You actually have to have, you have to have sign off in advance from NZTA if you want to do quality only procurement for a construction contract. So you have to, before you go out to market, go to NZTA, put a business case forward. Why for a construction contract? You actually only want to do quality only. Quality only generally tend to be more professional services, and that's not considered advanced procurement for professional service contracts, because generally you're not buying you're buying knowledge, I suppose. So it's quite difficult to sometimes gauge the construction aspect of it. In saying that, it's not always the case, because you've got quite a defined piece of work, and you've got a really well defined for bespoke piece of work, you can potentially get a few prices for that. So the types, this sort of feeds into how you want to deliver the work. You can have it staged. So when we talk about stage work, you generally might engage, say, a consultant to do some design work, or you might do some design work internally if you have the capacity, and then put a tender together for the construction phase, and that goes out to market. So phase 1 might be concept design, then phase 2 might be a detailed design, and the third phase might be construction. You'll go to market for each one of those. Another one is design and construct. That's typically what we've done using our bridges as an example. You go out to the market, you say what the outcome is that you want with some criteria, but then it's up to the market to price and the design component and the construct component, as long as they achieve the outputs that we want. So things like the width of the bridge, how much weight the bridge can take, as an example. What it looks like doesn't really matter as long as it conforms to the required standards. Supplier panel, that's normally a 2-stage. We've got a couple of them. We go for stage 1. I'll use our design panel. We go through criteria of the quality of, say, the staff, the work, the experience the company brings, etc. But when we actually want them to do a piece of work, bespoke piece of work, we go to them with that specific bespoke piece of work and get them to give us a price for that component, or you go to 2 or 3 of the panel. Then you don't have to necessarily go through the whole process of the health and safety, quality of the stock, because you've already done that evaluation. You're just more interested in, can they do it in the time frame and at what price? And then collaborative, that's more like our alliance, to be fair. We're working together. Client generally has a lot more input into what you're trying to achieve, and part of that sort of it's often interactive. So you'll have a first stage where you might eliminate some suppliers, and then you actually have workshops or presentations from suppliers, what they can offer you. We sort of covered off some of this, the alliances, but I suppose unlike a traditional contract where you might go out to market and have a lump sum value, what's it got to cost? $100,000, and then they deliver it, or you pay by meter or by cubic meter. The alliances with the cost reimbursed, we've got access to their books. What does it actually cost? What's the productivity? How much? So when you're developing the cost, how many hours are expecting the grader to run? Is it going to be 8,700 for the year? So you work out your cost based on the estimated running costs for the grader, as an example. Versus if we didn't have a alliance and open book model, we just say, what's the per kilometre rate for the grader? Whether they're productive with it or not productive with it, the rate's the rate. So we don't, and it also allows us, one of the advantages is we don't pay for risk, because we're taking on some of that risk. And so that's probably a big plus. And if things, particularly in volatile times, so the workload increases, we have massive price increases, you're not locked necessarily into a contract where we said you've got to do 100,000 or 10,000 cubes of gravel. So I've based my price on providing 10,000 cubes of gravel. We can say, well, hang on, we don't actually have the money for that. We can only going to do 5,000, but then you can see what the impact of that is around, say, the cost increasing or cost decreases.
Is there a disincentive under that one for the alliance operators to reduce their costs, because it doesn't really matter because they're making that stop?
There's the biggest risk that I see with that model is actually productivity. You're staying on top. So the cost element is because the cost is the cost. So down to what individual staff get paid, what they pay for cell phones. We see all those costs, and Brian Smith that comes in, that's what he audits and sees, well, okay, what's the cost of a grader, the capital cost of the grader, what they're paying for fuel. We can see all of that information, where a traditional model with the lump sum or we're not privy to any of that information. So it has got its pros and cons. The aspect of it compared to a traditional contract, we don't know how much risk is being built in with a traditional contract. And often with traditional contracts, or at least I'm talking now specifically maintenance contracts where work's not necessarily that defined with a set of plans, is that, like I was talking about the grading, if they want to be more efficient, like how do you get what's best for network? If weather conditions change or, as I said, you don't have enough budget, you start trading off. But if you stuck to a more traditional model, the contractors potentially been quite savvy around what they think that the network needs and what they're pricing on where. So some prices might be higher, some might be lower because they want to win the contract and bargaining on maybe doing more of certain type of work and less of another type of work. Well, I suppose with the alliance and the cost reimbursed model, the overhead and margins agreed up front. It doesn't matter what work you do, whether you grade or fix a pothole, it stays the same. So there's no incentive to try and do a certain amount of work, say in grading or metaling, where a traditional model might drive or tends to more drive that sort of behaviour, especially lump sum contracts. They'll try and do as little as they can because you're getting paid irrespective every month. Or say, I'll pick on grading again, giving you $10,000 a month. So if you grade 100 kilometres or you grade 50, I'm still paying you $10,000. So the incentive for the contractor is to do as little as they can for that $10,000. But I suppose the alliance style cost reimbursed, there's no incentive for them to take that sort of approach.
The work of Brian is audited because he's based in Christchurch.
Yeah.
Yes, and he's doing this for a number of areas.
He does
a good feedback on the cost.
Yeah, he does. So.
What paying the council is reflective of what it would be elsewhere.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he does pull a bit of a litmus test. Also sees that when they put in job sheets, that they are going incorrectly into the system. Yeah.
Yes. So he's looking quite a lot of detail.
Yeah. Looking at detail for us. Yeah.
So it's not just an internal monitoring process, although that's happening as well.
Yeah, we're doing the internal, but that's the beauty, I suppose, that we get Brian to come in, gives an external view, gives and gives that he's got the ability to compare. So, you know, whether it's $150 an hour or should be $200 or $120, he can give us some of that feedback.
And if we jump in just around the auditing, with the graders, keeping the grading one, I'll do many audits at sign off as well on invoice and ask for the GPS of the grader on the, you know, for these 3 days, they'll provide that information. We can look at the detail of that and go, yeah, that's what's been built to us. So we do mini audit, even there's many audits on the alliance contracts as well.
Yeah, I should have probably clicked over because, you know, we've just spoken about quite a few of those. Yeah, sort of mentioned plant utilisation as an example. And so if we want to reduce the level of service, they'll be quite, yep, we can do that, but be aware, you know, we're going from 1 FTE down to a half FTE or plant use, you know, we work the cost out on a plant utilisation of 7,000 hours for the year, but now you're only going to do 3,000. So this is the impact it's going to have from a budget and cost point of view. Well, yeah. I suppose the other thing about the alliances, you know, you can look at, say, having a lot of smaller contracts, but also recognising when we have emergency events, as an example, or a crash or oil spill or whatever, you know, they're there 24/7 to respond to that. Yeah, that's, I suppose, right. Maybe if I go over one more slide. Yeah, a lot of that stuff sort of spoke about from a structure point of view for the alliance contracts. I suppose it's just a general overview. So the day-to-day level, it's probably that left-hand side. We have a management team, which involves the contractor and council staff, and you know, having joint board work programs, meeting issues that crop up on the network. So it's on a daily basis engaging, and then on the right-hand side, we have elected member in this case, Councillor Menzies, and then Council GM, the likes of myself, and then also from the contractor side, it's not just their contract managers, actually regional managers, etc. We sort of get together around 3 times a year. So it might be emerging issues, so things like traffic management, that's been a hot one. What's that doing to the industry? Trying to get some insights into what that's doing in the industry, but also if there's issues that are cropping up, say at the alliance level? Is that the same across all alliances? Is specific to a certain alliance, health and safety? Just gives an opportunity to catch up and cover all those sorts of activities and try and catch things from elevating too early.
Also a bit of innovation that gets picked up and shared amongst that group as well, which is great.
Which goes back to, I suppose, the advantage of, say, an alliance versus a traditional contract. Generally, you go with a traditional contract that's priced on, this is our offering and that's it, because that's what we priced on. If we want to bring, and so it can be very difficult to bring new things in because we didn't price on that. Where the alliance contracts, there's no disincentive to not want to introduce better ways or new things of doing things, doing business. So I suppose just, in summary, when we are going out to market, it is looking at the capacity of the market, because for some activities it's quite small or niche. Others, there may be a whole range of suppliers. What sort of risk are we willing to take on as council? Do we want to be quite risk adverse or and push all that risk onto the contractor? But that actually comes at a cost. They factor that in for every job. Or are we willing to take on a bit of that risk and agree, well, we'll give that a go, because 9 out of 10 times that actually pays off, and accept that 1 out of 10 times it may not pay off, but we've actually made more than, or made enough savings with the other 9 times that it has paid off. The more contracts you have, the more management there's for us. There's more payment certificates, there's more oversight on things like insurances, bonds, having to go out. It's not just one person you have to deal with. You're meeting with a whole range of people. So there's a trade-off around that cost aspect too. And then, as I said, just the general procedural requirements around government procurement and NZTA procurement rules on how we actually procure those services. Hopefully that gives a bit of an oversight. I don't rush through it. That's quite a bit. Not happy to take any discussions or questions, but good opportunity. Contracts are, most of those contracts are coming up. We don't have them all necessarily come up all at the same time. The other thing I should probably mention is just from an NZTA point of view, if we want contracts longer than 5 years, we have to approach NZTA and get the sign-off from NZTA beforehand as well. Any contracts that potentially exceed 5 years. And the same alliance contracts are also considered advanced procurement, the way and the delivery model. So when we did those the last time, we went to NZTA before and I said, this is what we want to do. This is the reason why. Get sign-off from that. So it's a bit of upfront work with some of this contract. It just doesn't necessarily happen.
I bet Cartley, we're fortunate to have someone of your experience and knowledge sitting with us, because you've been with the council for some time and kind of know this area forwards and backwards. And I was mentioning the other day just about a community comment about the quality of the bitumen and other things going on the roads now, and I understood what a science that is, depending on where you live, and also the monitoring aspect of that, because questions around, does the importation of that material now make a difference to the quality, particularly where you see the lifting of that happening. But here in Southland, knowing the right mix, and there's always a tension.
There's right.
Because the weather has an impact along with other things.
It's a good point. So just because what they're doing Northland, for example, the mix that they use there may not be suitable for Southland because of our temperature ranges, but it comes at a trade-off also around sometimes it gets too hot, issues arise, or if it gets too cold, other issues arise. So it is a trade-off with some of that.
How much variation is there in gravel in the rivers?
In terms of the quality or the build-up
of the material used to build the road,
so there's definitely, like the Aparima River as an example for the sealed road construction, is generally a trickier material to work with. The reason for that is it's quite a clean material, and so once you crush it in the binding aspect, you need a reasonably experienced contractor to do that. Often you have to rework and work it quite hard. It's not just the quality of the aggregate, it's also the quality of the crushing plant. I know of a supplier that didn't get the quality right and had to remove, not on one of our jobs, but had to remove a lot of material, and they've invested quite heavily in new crushing material, crushing equipment, and they're very happy with the product or that equipment's now producing, and haven't had any issues since. So it's a whole it's a mixture of the crushing equipment plus the actual source. Out Edendale Way, you've got two sources that are not too far away from each other, but quality can vary quite a bit. Even for our own pits, like the near split that we've used historically, or we still use it, to be fair. We shied away actually as a result of I suppose jobs that haven't gone that well from the seams that have come out of that pit, where historically it's been pretty good for us, and we've got a lot of roads built with it.
You know, I've said it before, you know, when they're doing that one at Aotearoa, they were carting gravel from Clifton. Well, it so much looked like we're wrecking as much road to Aotearoa than what it was to fix the road. We probably could have got it from raised bush or something like that. But so how much control over do you have about where the gravel and stuff comes from to fix the particular road that you want?
Yeah, so short answer is in terms of the pavement rehabilitations, we don't, because we don't specify, we specify the quality that we want, not the source. And so it's up to the contractors when they're tendering for that work and crushing to ensure that they meet the standard. So whether they can obtain that standard from source A versus source B, that risk sits with the contractor, not with us. In some cases, I know with one of them, there's consenting delays that have resulted in having to change sources. Other times it has been quality where they've said, yep, we want it to come from this source, and that's what they put in their tender, and we've accepted that. And then when they've actually gone to crush and the quality, they haven't been able to achieve the appropriate quality out of that, so they've had to change to a different source because they can't meet the specification from their original source.
So you have no input, so actually, because I've heard rumours, it's only rumour, but particular contractors won't buy off a certain gravel supplier, so that supplier doesn't get a chance to tender the gravel. So be it they're carting it from way the hell over here, wrecking the roads, getting it to there.
Yeah, so that's the short answer for those payment rehabilitations that we're talking about. The short answer is no. I suppose that brings the other element into, I was talking about risk. So we can go and tender, say, for the gravel supply, and then we can go and tender for the road construction component. So we've got a contract on this hand that, say, for the action and crushing of the material, then councils purchase that, and then we go and supply to company B, who's now going to go and actually lay that material on the road and compact it, etc. If something goes wrong with it and the road starts failing, then how do you show, well, hang on, it's not the construction methodology, it's a supply methodology, or no, it's not the supply of the aggregate, it's actually got to do with the construction. If it all sits with one contract, one supplier, the risk then all sits with that contractor. So from a council point of view, whether it's a construction methodology or it's a material issue, it's still the same contractor's issue.
The issue that I've got and pretty much like what Derek was saying with the cartage issue is the biggest cost on roading. Other contracts work aside is the material costs, and that cartage is the big factor in the cost of material. Was it 32 kilometres it doubles or something? So is there the question from me on this workshop, in the process of contract, and when you look at quality and price, is there also the ability to look at achieving outcomes in that procurement, where the outcomes are trying to ensure that the material to job site is as close to source as possible to minimise cartage? Obviously, it still has to tick that quality. It still has to that scenario of, well, if it's from two separate contracts,
you've got two separate councils, a supplier, and
from what we have to discuss in the future contracts and procurement, can it be approached in a way to meet outcomes that minimise cartage, for example?
Yeah, there's a way you can, I haven't looked at cottage per se, but in terms of contracts, you can look at what we term broader outcomes. So community impacts, reduction in, whether it's emissions or, you probably put the cottage aspect, probably put that under the emissions aspect to a certain extent. There's more you cotton, the greater your emissions. So we haven't really delved into it in great detail. Some of that broader outcomes has probably been more the use of subcontractors. So using subcontractors, what are you putting back into the community? Whether it's providing or supporting planting days or whatever, or training opportunities. So there's a whole, I suppose, raft. It's not just cottage. I'll take the point on it, but there's a whole raft of things that you can consider if you want to go towards considering the quality aspect. I suppose the challenge comes in if you've got to go with still want to go with, say, a lowest price conforming type of methodology. You can have the quality aspects, say just a pass-fail then scenario. How do you evaluate, you can't go if you're the shortest, you pass, if you're the furthest, you're a fail. So it doesn't quite work from that, from a tenure evaluation. You'd have to put a quality component in it. And then if, say, the gravel source is closer, but for whatever reason, from a commercial point of view, because you own the pit, so I can supply it at cost, where if I get it from the closest source, I'm paying for retail value. Is council happy to pay more for the closest source, even though it may be more expensive, because the person's trying to win the job and therefore utilize their own source at cost? So as commercial tensions, we're not necessarily always privy to those commercial tensions. And that's where you may find that in some cases, actually I can get a better deal, or yes, I've got a cot 10 Ks more, but overall it's saving me, from a bottom line point of view, I'm still saving money because I can get a better deal, or it's my own source. We're not always privy to that sort of commercial aspect of it.
The cost of cartage is taken into account in the current procurement.
It impacts on cost.
Yeah, right.
So we pay for our rehabs, make up a number, we're paying $100 a cube. That includes the crushing, the extraction, the crushing, carting to site, the compaction of it, laying ready to use.
So that double the materials has already happened.
Yeah, so it's all factored in. So if company A is $100, company B is $120, that's factored into the price from bottom line point of view.
But we're already determining the quality by setting the standard.
Correct.
So it's in their interest to win the tender.
Yeah, so if you want to,
the cheapest option around cartage as well, which would be, you would think, the closest to them, unless the other factor is that they own the quarry wherever. So they're willing to pay the extra cartage of 10 kilometres.
Because the raw material is at a lower cost and offsets the extra cartage cost. So that's factored into
Does it
the
not
tender
take
price,
people out of
really.
the market though? If a particular contractor actually owns the pit and that's the closest one, but yet he's not going to sell it to, but yet someone puts a price in for the cartage but can't get access to that gravel. So the bigger contractors that own their own pits probably have quite a monopoly on the roading.
Yeah, they could do. Yeah, but it's not. There's definitely only gravel only suppliers out there that multiple contractors utilise. Yeah.
The other kind of outcomes-based thing, being aware of wider regional conversations like floodplain management and what does that mean for gravel management? Is there the opportunity to be more proactive with this, to understand where the roading needs are going to be, to then source the gravel in line with where gravel removal may need to come from? Like, is there a way to kind of hit those outcomes? Because that's like the big conversation with gravel management and floodplain management is, unless we change how we procure gravel to build roads, we'll end up subsidising removing gravel out of rivers to stop flooding. So trying to link the two to work together.
Yeah.
Is there a way that can kind of be addressed within the contract procurement process? It's kind of long term.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably a longer term. I think it comes down outside of the contract, actually, council and what council wants to do around that, and actually invest in terms of resource to look at the longer term, the gravel opportunities, consenting potentially, so that contractors don't have to. We may not necessarily crush and supply the material, we may just make the source available. So you can still potentially, when it comes to tendering time, put the option out there. Council has this source if you want to use it. And it's open to whoever wants to use it. It doesn't come risk free because gravel or quarry management, there's rules around that and have to be aware of sort of the health and safety aspects of that. But I suppose that becomes a bit of council business and we supply to the market irrespective of who you are, whether you're company A, B or C, it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really address like the commercial aspect of it, but I guess I'm like referring to if the ratepayer to the regional council essentially needs to pay for work that ends up resulting in a gravel surplus.
Yeah.
It's commercial gravel suppliers aren't going to necessarily like that if they're a quarry, but if the model is to more be able to react to where there's going to be gravel surpluses to do the processing to make the commercially viable aggregate.
Yeah.
That's just seeing where regional and infrastructure council applications actually meet to get some efficiency.
I think there's definitely opportunities there, but it takes resource to do it.
Yeah.
And at the moment, the resource isn't there to do it.
It's also checking that there's not contract hang-ups that then go, well, it can't be looked at until these arrangements.
No, there's not. No, we don't have any. No, there's no. We don't have. To the best of my knowledge, we don't have any contractual obligations to. It's this source, or this source. It's the quality that we want out of it, and yeah, that's what it sort of stems down to. Yeah, it's just the time, time and effort and cost associated with doing their work.
I know it's a funding problem, but at the end of the day, we're not building roads anymore, and now we're sort of struggling to maintain them. So
yeah, it's about maintaining what we have.
The model was wrong that we can't even afford to. If something's
that's a whole funding funding conversation.
But then you look at the red tape and 60 years ago they got on the built and probably done it quite well. It's a bit like the guy said, you don't need consultants.
But
nothing on that point, and I want Hartley's head to be able to fit out the door. So just touching on what Christine said, like Cameron and I had a conversation with NZTA the other day, and they said one of the strengths that we've got here in Southern District is actually in our staffing, and both the skill and capability and the longevity of the staff. So they actually understand the network, which we can see clearly here. They understand the network inside out. So we've actually got quite a big strength in terms of the team that we've got. So yeah, just I guess recognising and acknowledging the fact that we've got the good operations on the ground to get us the best what we can, even though we're in those funding restrictions, we're getting the best bang for buck, and we are delivering our roading programs, and we are actually doing a whole lot of stuff, and we've got an appetite to look into new things that we're talking about today as well. So it's I think we're pretty lucky in terms of where some of our other councils might be. So
are we doing a 17A review?
We have to do one. Yeah.
So that's just the alliances are 18 months to go.
Yeah, something like that.
Maybe 19 months to go. So they are coming up for a review next week. Also, the 17A will
capture it. Yeah, just in terms of, I suppose, it's just the way, not by design, it's just the way it's worked out. So with the different timeframes of our different contracts, they're all coming due in the next, or potentially have the opportunity to come due in the next 2 years. And so from a 17A requirement, there's a time frame every 6 years, but also when you got significant contracts. And so we happen to have in that same time period, our alliances, our resurfacing contract will come up. That's $20 million plus. So it's quite a lot of money tied up in this contract. So within the next 2 years, a lot of them are all coming due at exactly the same, or within that 2 year period. And it's within 2 years you've got to do a 17A review. So it's just, as I said, not by design, it's just the way it's happened for our contract, which is workload.
Review would be next triennium.
No, it was started.
Even now.
Yeah, because by the time we get the 17A review carried out, then looking at our next round of contracts and the procurement, and if you have a change in supplier, particularly with the maintenance contracts, leading time, less of an impact probably with our reseal, resurfacing, and pavement rehabilitation contracts, because we already procure them on a sort of season by season basis. And they're quite bespoke, where the others, setting up depots and graders. As an example, we probably got around 7.5 graders across the network. And so your cyclic crews, it's quite a bit of people power tied up and machinery tied up. I suppose that's the other consideration with the length of the contracts, is the investment in equipment, and payback time on equipment, because they don't come cheap. And so, but there's efficiency gains by if you can invest in it, and you got a longer term contract, and you can recoup the cost of that investment over 6-7 years. More likely to actually invest in that equipment, which is more efficient, more environmental friendly, and buy new, whatever it is. Yeah.
Is there any concerns with the fact that this round of contracts is coming up now, and there is a lot of changes with maybe changes of code of practice with gravel extraction and things? Is there any concerns with our suppliers over consents and not really having that surety of?
I haven't heard of any. I suppose I haven't heard of anything new that happened to potentially in the past. I suppose I'll go back to the rehab's like quite short duration, so quite low risk, from an uncertainty point of view. But the longer term maintenance contracts, because of the length, it's quite a bit of uncertainty, and that's where the likes of the alliance contracts and with the cost reimbursed model, there's a lot of flexibility and more ability to adapt to changes in legislation, all that. Yeah.
I know the gravel pit in Lumsden's consent expires.
Yeah.
Next year or maybe.
Yeah. So the more difficult it becomes, the more costs involved in obtaining consents. Ultimately, the cost does flow through to the likes of ourselves. We're not necessarily the only user, but as a user, there will have an impact on us.
Thank you. That was a very good. I've just seen Julie, there's any questions, but I'll take silence as accepted. Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for an interesting day out in Te Anau. Now we can all be like Sarah and drive home for a couple of hours.
Yep.
But I will actually because I haven't done that yet. Kia ora, te marino, kia whakapanamu, ahurahi, mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa, huiei, tai here. May peace be widespread, may the sea be like brimstone, a pathway for us all this day, let us show respect for each other, for one another, bind us all together. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And thank you to the staff for working remotely. Fiona and Andrew.
This is also Andrew's last setup for us.
Is it? Abandoning us. What? Oh, thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
So I should have said, purposely didn't hand it out, but if anybody wants a copy of the presentation, I'd print it. Cool. Thank you. Cool.
Can't wait. If you send me the file, I'll put it on.
It's on.